Some people spend a lifetime searching for who they're supposed to be. Today's guest simply decides, reinvents, and creates her way there. Meet Catherine Cortlandt, a mother, Reiki master, meditation teacher, tattoo artist, and true Renaissance woman. She has mastered the art of the pivot. Through seasons of loss, reinvention, and profound transformations, she has rewritten her own story, proving that creativity isn't just one outlet. It's a pathway to healing, freedom, and discovering who you truly are. Now, she's standing at the edge of a brand new chapter, choosing adventure over certainty and trusting that even if she falls, she'll create her way forward. This is Catherine's answer to What Are You Birthing? I am here with Miss Catherine Cortlandt. Catherine, we've known each other. We've been in community for like some years.
Yeah.
But I've come to the realization that you can know someone or know of someone without actually knowing their story. So I'm super excited that you said yes to sharing a bit of your story with us. So thank you. Thank you for being here. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And if there's someone who's meeting you for the first time today, what would you want them to know before we dive into your story?
Okay. So I decided to be an artist when I was 4 and have never wavered from that. Like, it's never been like, oh, a nurse and a ballerina, like it's never been anything else. And I think my mother has a lot to do with that. When I was small, she was getting her BA in painting, drawing, and sculpture, even though she ultimately ended up doing elementary education and then Montessori education. But she was painting. We were in the art supply store all the time. She got a paintbrush, I got a paintbrush. When she was learning calligraphy, I was learning calligraphy at the same time as I was learning cursive. So it's just been something that I do, something that I live, and I just couldn't imagine doing anything else for any reason. But it's life. So you sometimes have to do other things. So I've done a lot of things. I've been a puppeteer. I've worked at an insurance company filing papers. I've made jewelry. I've worked in a bead store. I've done filmmaking. I've even done acting. I've done dancing. I've done all the different things because just a creative life is the only thing that I could really imagine for myself.
That's pretty fascinating. And you've been a mother and you've been a daughter and a wife and many of the things.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in kind of diving into your journey. On your intake form, you said your journey began as a dream in 1996. It became a reality in 2016, and it's still shifting in 2026. Can you tell me a little bit more about that timeline and what stands out to you most about who you were in each of those seasons?
So 1996, as far as tattooing, it came to fruition, but it started earlier than that. I worked at a bead store called Orb Weaver in Oakland, California. And one of my coworkers, his name was Issa Eismont, and we are still connected on Instagram. And his friends were tattoo apprentices in San Francisco. And I had never really seen artistic tattooing. I came up in the 90s. People were getting tattoos of what I deemed stupid shit, like Tasmanian Devil, spinning a basketball, smoking a cigar, Woody Woodpecker, somebody's name on your tit, like that whole kind of thing. And I just didn't have, it was never like my friend group never was like, oh, let's go down and get tattoos. It was actually until the 90s illegal to even tattoo within the city limits of New York. So that was just not a thing. And even when I lived in Philadelphia, when I was going to Temple, it just wasn't a thing. I passed a tattoo shop every day on my way from the train to my apartment and never even thought to go in. But him coming in with all this like kind of colorful stuff, he had also gone to an arts high school in New York, he and his friends. And so they were really kind of translating their artwork into what they were doing on his body, practicing on him. So every 6 weeks he was coming with something new, and it was fascinating. And I was already into face and body painting and henna and all of those things, particularly at the shop that we worked at. We had the big coffee table books, African Arc and Africa Adorned. And most of what went on in those books was that in many of our African traditions, you would have you get some sort of jewelry provided to you or made for you. And then there would be some sort of ritual where you were either painted or scarification, some sort of body modification, some sort of body adornment. So I was already completely just besotted with that as a concept, and then thinking I didn't know if there were Black tattoo artists. I didn't even care at that point. And so shortly thereafter, I did ask him if he could introduce me to these two guys. They were 19 years old apiece. They couldn't even talk to a girl, much less tell me about what I needed to know. And so I started going around to the tattoo shops in San Francisco, because the ones in Oakland were in places that I definitely should not be going by myself at all. And there were a couple of shops on the Lower Haight, and I would go in and look around. Usually would be crowded and the artists would be working. And then one day I went and the guy wasn't working. And he was really kind of the stereotypical big barrel-chested white guy, beard, sweaty t-shirt, smelled like cigarettes, gravelly voice. And he goes, he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, you come in here all the time, what is it that you want?" And I said, "Well, I'm interested in finding out, like, how do you do apprenticeships?" And he said, "Well, let me see your stuff." And he looked through my artwork and he's like, "Well, your style lends itself to the art form, but me nor anybody I know would ever apprentice you because you're Black and you're a woman." And I was like, bet. So at that point, now I got to do it, right? I got to do it. But I ended up applying to graduate school and doing that, and, learning all this theory about why people make art across cultures and all of these things, which has served me well, don't get me wrong, and kind of let it go, because part of what he said did stick with me. But another part of it, I was like, I'm not having that. And was getting to the end of my program. And I was kind of like, I really think I want to do this thing. And I'm just the kind of person, if I want to do something, I'm going to ask everybody if they know somebody, if they know about it. Do you kind of know where I could go? Do you kind of know somebody? And this woman, what was her name? I can't remember her name. But we had become pretty good friends. She would come into the bead shop. She used to make dichroic glass bead earrings. And we got to talking, and she had gone to School of Visual Arts in New York. And I was talking to her one day and I said, I really think I want to do this tattooing thing. And she's like, "Oh, this friend of mine who was in my program did her photo MFA show on tattoo artists from different cultures. You should really go talk to her." She gave me her number. I called her up and I went to go see her in her studio. And I think that day she had a lady was coming in, and the lady came in with a flower in a jar, like a vine of flowers in a jar of water. She set it down in the middle of her table. And the woman's name was Linda. And Linda was talking to me with the tattoo machine on the lady's arm. And she was looking at the flower, and she tattooed that flower onto that lady's arm. No stencil, no drawing first, nothing. And it was beautiful. And I was like, yes, I have to do this. And so, and that was 1996. Probably the initial conversation that I had with Issa probably was like 92 or thereabouts. And I went to 2 years of grad school in between. I was still kind of finishing up school. I was working on campus. And she said, you know, you can come on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning, because that was when I had space, and watch me for X number of weeks. And then you'll start cleaning up, and then you'll start doing this, and you'll start doing that. Because she had kind of run into the same thing as a woman, that nobody was willing to apprentice her. She ended up having, this is pre-internet, back in the 1900s. And she ended up buying her first tattoo machine out from an ad in the back of a magazine, and did a piece on herself on her foot. And that's what kind of convinced the person that she had been asking that she was serious. And she was serious because she had done an interview, a photo essay, on a gentleman of Maori descent who lived in Los Angeles. And he had told her that in his culture, it's believed that your tattoo lives below the surface of your skin. And it's through a spiritual process between you and your artist that brings your tattoo to the surface of your skin. And just from a spiritual perspective, that blew her mind. And that was what made her decide that she really wanted to do this. So, of course, when she told me that story, I already was all in. And by that time, I was like, oh, yes, this has to happen. And then within a month, maybe month and a half, I found out that I was pregnant with my first child. And she was very kind of spiritual woo-woo anyway. And so when I told her, she said that she did not feel comfortable inflicting pain on people while I was present and gestating a human, because she didn't know what that might do. And I'm like, but it's not happening to you, and I'm just watching, and, you know, but then I realized, this is not my space, you know? This is not really even an argument. She said what she said. Let me just respect what she said. And I figured, well, I'll have the baby, and then I'll figure out how I'll be able to start this up again. And then 14 months later, I had another baby. And then it was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get to this. So let me get down with the get down of what I've studied. And that was kind of set me on the road to working in arts administration and museum work and programming. At that point, when I was in Northern California, I did a lot of programming for youth and youth development kind of things, programs where the art space that I worked for would hire artists and bring them into these other like social service agencies to create programming. So like one of them was Girl Project, giving an inspiring responsibility in life, which was funded by the juvenile justice system in San Francisco, because they were noticing that the girls that they were starting to see coming in were getting younger and younger. And so matched the girls with, it was two agencies. One was Horizons Unlimited that worked with Latino youth, and the other was Westside Community Health Center, which worked with African-American youth in the Fillmore district, which is really not African-American anymore, unfortunately, due to gentrification. But yeah, so those were like the kind of inspiring things that I was doing. And then I worked for East Bay Community Foundation. I was the Associate Director of Arts Partnerships for Educational Excellence. And we gave out grants to schools and teachers to do arts integration in the schools. But before that, in grad school, I worked on a variety of amazing projects, like the Legacy of the Panthers, which was a photo essay that originally started from when Mario Van Peebles was starting the process of doing his interviews for the movie Panther. He talked to Frederica Newton and David Hilliard about the things that had gone on, and they hatched a plan that when the movie opened in Oakland, that because they could see that the focus in the film was going to be on the guns and the drugs and the paranoia and all these other parts and pieces, that they wanted to really show what had really happened, and that they could show that through photographs. And so Joe Louis Moore, who was one of my classmates who I had worked on his thesis show, which was called Black Power, Black Art, and the Struggle Continues, which kind of started my museum thing because I ended up creating the docent program for that exhibit. And it was a full day symposium on the Black arts movement and how the Black arts movement had fed the civil rights movement through freedom songs, through theater work, and through visual artwork, like the Afro-Cobra group out of Chicago. Just so many different groups and so many different ways that art really fueled that movement as well. And so we went, there was this hippie dude in Berkeley who had banker boxes in his basement full of photographs. And we just sat and pulled photographs. We ended up culling 40 of them and framing them. It didn't actually end up happening at the opening. The opening actually ended up being in LA instead of Oakland, so that didn't happen. But they did a partnership with Barnes and Noble. And the big Oakland Barnes and Noble, which is no longer there, displayed them. And then when I got here, I worked for an organization called Cultural Education Collaborative. I got sent to Seattle for a training. I walk into the Barnes and Noble in Seattle and the photographs were up. So it's like all these really amazing kind of ways that just life just kept lifing, but still kept me connected to creative things that I'd been doing, you know?
Wow. And so what is happening now? How is that all shifting for you now?
So 1996, have to end it. 1997, give birth to the first child. 1998, give birth to the second child. 1999, my mother becomes ill here in Charlotte. She'd never seen my son at that point. I fly cross country. She makes it through the open heart surgery, but I'm like, I need to be in Charlotte by October of 2000. October 2000. I arrived in Charlotte September 28th, 2000, on the train with my two kids. My now ex-husband drove cross country with our things. And I really didn't think I was going to get to tattoo. Where was I going to find? I felt like I wanted to learn from a woman, but where was I going to find a woman? And I did go around to different shops. People introduced me to different people. I went to different shops and introduced myself. There was one shop on Central Avenue. It was like upstairs. It was real dark. Walls were all painted black. And I'd taken my daughter there to get her nose pierced. And so I asked the guy, and somebody had told me about this guy before, and I asked him about apprenticeship. He looked at me up and down. He said, "You look like a nice lady. Why would you want to do something like this? Why don't you go do eyebrows or something?" And I was like, "Oh shit, all right." Damn.
What?
And then one of my kids had a friend who graduated from Myers Park with them, and he was tattooing at a shop called House of Pain up on Independence. And I would go and talk to him, and he would tell me little things, but he wasn't really being super forthcoming with opportunities or anything like that. And then I spoke to Jay-Z Addict. She's heavily tattooed, and I asked her, who was the best person that's tattooed you locally, bar none? And she said, Haley, hands down. And as a matter of fact, she's tattooing me on Thursday. Why don't you come, bring 2 packs of gum, I'll introduce you. I was like, bet. So I go, and it was the way she was working on her. She was doing a sternum piece on her, and it was just in the midst of this kind of slightly smelly, pretty funky kind of spot, Foos up on North Davidson. But she had created in the middle of that her own kind of little oasis with her artwork on the wall. And it was just a vibe, and just the way she was working on her. And so she introduces us, and, at the end, before I left, I think they were on a break, and I was like, oh, I would really love to learn from you. And she was like, she's so sweet. She was like, no, I don't think that that's something that I want to do, because I would really need to be in my own shop and X, Y, and Z. But one way to kind of connect with people would be to get tattooed by me. My deposit is $150 and whatever. So I was like, okay, bet. And so I had my little envelope, and I was putting my little money in it. And I swear every time I got to 150, somebody would need shoes. One time it was, ma'am, the nail is holding the tire together. I can't patch it again. You're going to have to come up off this money. And so that just wasn't happening. So I really I was like, I'm going to still follow this woman. I'm still trying to put this 150 together and get a little something from her, but it's never going to happen. And she was still at Foods too. And then right around the time that I got laid off from the Gantt Center, well, they eliminated my position. And that's a whole nother story, child. But right around that time, Creative Loafing had done a piece on tattoo artists locally. And in her piece, she said that she was going to be opening a shop of her own. And so she was one of the first people I followed on Instagram, because I wanted to find out. I wanted to be about it. And by that time, I was living right at Siegel Point, right up the street from Central Avenue. And I kept saying, I should go up there. I should go up there. I should go up there. And never went up there. And then, one thing led to another. And I ended up going to a workshop there. Gina Spriggs was giving a beginning of the year journaling, meditation, something or other. I was teaching swim lessons at the Harris Y and the Johnston Y. I was teaching dance and drama at Community Charter School. I was working on the philanthropy exhibit at Johnson C. Smith. I was also back at the Gantt Center doing the 7th grade tours. And I was sleeping on a pull-out ottoman in my mother's old room at my sister's house. Driving in from way South Charlotte, Ray Road, Piper Glen, whatever, every day. And also driving my daughter from there all the way to Northwest School of the Arts and back. And usually would have to drive my son to school at Myers Park in the morning because he was always missing the bus. It was a lot.
It certainly sounds like it. And you are a woman that has lived many lives wrapped up in one. I mean, from you to go to doing all this, like from the outside looking in, fabulous work. You mentioned the Gantts and teaching dance and all the things. Also, I was sleeping on my sister's couch. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot to unpack. Let's unpack. So you've raised 3 unexpected people when you thought you just were going to be an aunt.
Yeah. I thought I was going to, honestly, that's what I was doing. I was going to be the aunt that was going to be doing residencies around the world and, flowing into town. I mean, the die for that had already been cast, where my sister and brother-in-law's anniversary, they would go away. They would pay for me to come from California. I'd stay at their house, drive their car, get my nephew to and from his things, hang out, play with him, but I'd have my days free. Aunt was the shit.
Sounds like it. Let's talk a little bit about that, because in addition to raising 3 children, you also mentioned your mom, who you had to care for while your sister had cancer. Mm-hmm. And you survived 2 bouts of homelessness. So how did creativity become your survival tool in all of those moments wrapped up?
I think if I had had any other kinds of jobs, I don't think I would have made it. Just because at least I had that. At least I could always fall back on that. And I think that has also sustained me as well, because I have done so many things that I always feel as though, well, you know, if this don't work out, I can always do this, and this. And even when I was at my sister's house, even though I had the apprenticeship, I still felt obligated to apply for a real job because my sister and brother-in-law live in a different world from me. They are 10 years older. They are both physicians. They have this life that's very put together, aside from illness, because that could happen to anybody. It don't matter, you know, what your status is. But I realized that I did a lot of this education part of myself to make my mother and sister feel more comfortable with me being this creative, because I think there was so much fear around me not being able to support myself. Mm-hmm. But I may have been underemployed at different times, but I've always been able to make something shake. Always, you know. I've illustrated several children's books, which has filled the gaps in different ways. When I was living at my sister's house, I would sit at the kitchen table and do my cover letters and fill out applications, but then I was doing these drawings that ended up becoming the coloring book that I published. And the money from that coloring book was money that I used when I needed to leave their house, because I told them that I needed to stay there through my son's graduation from high school. And it was time. It was time. We needed to go. We absolutely needed to go. But the money from having sold copies of the coloring book became that money that also sustained me. And it's interesting because I've never been so broke than in the times when I've had a regular job with benefits and this and that and the third, because regular jobs in nonprofit, especially here in Charlotte, are never enough to really do everything that you need to do. So I've always been, you know, at the club, at Sukasa, painting faces and counting my money at the end and going, whoo, groceries, whoo, gasoline, you know, those kinds of things, or having some sort of artistic, creative thing kind of come through and become what I needed. Even before that, when the Gantt Center was the Afro Center, I was a teaching artist. So I'd go into schools and do those things. And so it's always been there, and it's always sustained me.
I think that's super dope. I think that's the direction we are all kind of moving in. We are going to have to figure out how we can expand our creativity and think outside the box. I mean, even if we look around the world and how things are kind of, it's almost like the walls are closing in. Mm-hmm. All the things that we've been taught that are going to sustain us are no longer true. It's changing and it's shifting rapidly. So there is this belief that artists can't make money through their art. And you've talked and shown through your life, your walk, how art is resilient, or how you can be resilient by being a creative person. What shifted and broke that belief for you that artists cannot make money through their art?
I don't know that it ever did break. I think it's up until probably the Halo years, that decade of actually, you know, little Kathy, who said, I want to be an artist when she was 4. And when they asked me why, I said, because I want to draw all day. And then that first day that I had a client, or several clients, that first day in Halo, and I'm there at the drawing table going, oh shit, I get to draw all day. like that really, the proof was in the pudding. And that had happened even before that, because even though I may have had, especially like in my 20s, when I first moved out to California, that was probably the first time that I really, with the exception of a few temp jobs here and there when I needed to pay a car note or a little extra something, I was always doing something. I worked at the bead store. she would pay me to do the windows because I had experience in visual display from working at Macy's in New Jersey and in San Francisco. Then we had a little drawer where people would bring in things that needed to be restrung. And from that restringing thing, there was a lady, very, very wealthy woman who would go to Thailand on these yoga retreats and bring back these beads, and she needed them strung. And I would sit in front of the TV and string up bags and bags of these beads, and then she'd bring me fat checks. One day, this woman from Klutz Press walked into the store because they were doing a children's book on beadwork. And I ended up being part of that book. I had 3 different activities that I had to write out how to make this bracelet, how to make these earrings, and the whole thing. That was the first time I was like published by a big publisher. So I think just understanding that if I keep going, it'll keep going. And that was probably the first time in my life that my money wasn't coming all from one source, but it was always coming from one source, right? My creativity.
The proof was just there. Like, you just have to keep showing up for yourself and trusting the process to unfold. And you kept getting opportunities to show up and trust the process.
Mm-hmm. And actually there's one more thing, right? Okay. So another thing that happened, my son was little because I would have him in a little backpack on my back. And the Berkeley Art Museum had an exhibit of Faith Ringgold's American and French quilts. And I got to be a tour guide. And you'd have to kind of like tell some of the stories, paraphrase, because she'd have a painting in the center, and then the story would be written around the outer edge of the quilt. And I'd be in there with my baby on my back, just telling the stories. But one thing that stuck with me, Faith Ringgold did an artist talk before the exhibit opened. And she said, you know, when my artwork started to look like I made it and I didn't mind, that was when I knew I had made it, right? And so I kind of pulled that. And even in the midst of all the other things that were going on, it's like, if I can make things, I am always going to be okay.
And I'm even thinking about the stories that you've shared that you receive from other people, like the story about someone telling you that the connection between the tattoo artist and the person that they're tattooing really brings the art to the forefront, you know? And it's almost as if those things, well, not almost, they made imprints on you and kind of sustained you through. Like, you had those little reminders, not even little reminders, huge, massive reminders.
Big reminders.
Very big reminders that made an imprint on who you were, things that you could look back and reflect on as you kind of stumbled along the way, you know, when you had those lows.
Well, stumbled along the way, but also as I had to kind of block out what people were also telling me about not being able to support yourself. Well, you don't know if that's going to work out okay, and all these other things. But then I had the empirical evidence that I could do it. But then I went through periods where I'm like, I'm not sure. And I tell my kids all the time, like, if my mother was a big supporter, but she also was from a different time and space. She was born in 1929. She had me in 1967. That's a big difference in the way people live and deal and conceptualize what you should or can be doing with your life. So I don't place any blame on anybody. My sister, her thing is she's a very pragmatic Capricorn. And so for her, things have to be very ordered and a plan, and it's got to be a thing. And me being a quadruple Pisces, I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place doing all the different things, and I'm also a meditation teacher. But
I just keep stacking it up.
My meditation teacher told me once, during the time when I was staying with my sister, he said, she doesn't even understand how you're still alive. Because these things keep happening, and then you just figure it out and come on through.
When you think about the version of yourself who kept going through loss, housing instability, caregiving, and change, what would you want to acknowledge or thank her for today? Because you had some serious staying power.
That I'm a lifelong learner, right? I think that was one of the things that was kind of sad about the end of the Gantt Center part of my career, because I loved what I did, but I was just I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over, and I wasn't provided with the opportunities to kind of learn and expand who I was through that career. And then when that ended, that was when the meditation thing came about, because I had done a youth program. I'd actually worked with a friend of mine, had gotten asked to work with the young girls in the teenage parents program through CMS at Hawthorne High School. And she had never worked with kids before, so she asked me to come along and add an art component. And so that was kind of my first time doing yoga and meditation with young people. And that kind of led to, and that was just before I started at the Gantt. So when youth meditation started, Ranjit, who is my teacher, my guru, asked a friend of mine if he knew anybody, because most of the women that he was working with were of a certain hue and a certain socioeconomic status. And the first project that Youth Meditation was going to be doing was with the homeless population of students with CMS through A Child's Place, their summer camp. And it was felt that maybe we might need to have somebody else of color in this thing. So I ended up getting the training for free and was in the midst of my own instability, but was learning this process for helping children to learn how to keep themselves centered. And I was learning right along with them. And so just the way the opportunity dovetailed with what was going on with my own story, and just knowing that, you're going to be okay. You're going to breathe through it. But now that I'm thinking about it, it actually goes even further, way, way back. I grew up Black Catholic in Harlem. And during a kind of difficult period in my childhood. And you would, on Wednesdays, there was Mass, and you had to go to confession. And I'm 7 years old. I'm not really doing you lying in confession because you ain't got nothing to tell. But I shared something about something that was kind of going on. And the response was to do some ridiculous number of Hail Marys and go back to the kneeler and do these Hail Marys. And I realized that was, when I was studying meditation, I realized that was the first time I had ever meditated, because I kind of was doing them and then I came out of it and I was still kneeling. The Mass had continued. My teacher was seated and all of my classmates were seated, but I was still there, gone. And then kind of looked around and then got up. And I know for a fact Mother Mary came to me and told me that I would be okay. And this is what she told me. It's a book, and this is just a chapter. And so as you move through, there's going to be many chapters. And so you need not be concerned about what this chapter holds, because it's all part of your full story. 7 years old. And that's why I have the tattoo that I have of the Black Madonna on my arm, because when I thought about what would I want, that was what I wanted. And so, it's like these things that kind of come back to you and you don't even realize that they had these major impacts on who you are as a person.
The divine synchronicities. I always say I don't believe in coincidences. And the things that we find so difficult in life, trying to move through whatever challenges present themselves, and it feels so hard in the moment, like you feel stuck there. When you look back, 3, 5, 7 years, it's like, wow, a lot of times it makes more sense. And as you sit before me and you're able to reflect on all of those things, I'm even able to see how those things were connecting, and carrying you, through your journey over and over again.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, you talk about working with children, but you're a mama and your youngest, Maya, is a super dope artist. So you made an impression on her to continue to work. But how were you able to continue as an artist and really give all to your art with raising children and being a wife and all of those things?
I don't necessarily know that I gave all to my art. I think the give all to my art, this is the time that's when it's really going to go down. So I'm really excited about what this next phase is going to look like, because now I actually have the time and the wherewithal to focus on just me and my art. But I still did it. I still made it happen. That I've always had a drafting table. I remember we lived in Seagull Point right up the street, and they would come in to do the inspections, and I would always be in trouble because I didn't have a dining table in my dining room. My dining table was somewhere stuck in a corner, or we just ate on the couch, because whatever dining room area I had always ended up being a studio space. So when I was working on the Wings and Dreams book, I was kind of between jobs, and everybody would go to bed, and that was the time when I would draw. So the kids knew when they got up in the morning, they would go and look on what was on the table and see kind of this book, these illustrations unfold. It's always been this in tandem thing. It was I never had the luxury, I guess, at the point when I started giving birth to humans, to just do my work in some sort of private thing. My ex-husband wasn't that kind of cat, that just wasn't the vibe at all. So it was always simultaneous.
Okay. So now is the time for your art to flourish, because now you're an empty nester. You're a grandmother. What does your grandbaby call you?
Gigi.
So Gigi. Has becoming a grandmother shifted anything about how you see the younger woman that you used to be, especially since you just thought you were going to be an aunt?
It still is like, whoa. I mean, when my daughter gave birth, she was staying with me. And I remember that first day, the first morning after we brought the baby home, and walking into the room, and my baby, who I still remember looking into that little face with the dimples, was holding her baby. That was a trip. That was a trip. And then even just this past March, went out to California for my niece's wedding. And my granddaughter was born 2 days after what would have been my mother's 90th birthday. So she passed in September of 2017. And her birthday was October 8th, 1929. My daughter went into labor on the 8th. And so we all thought that it was going to be immediate. She waited 2 days. So she came through 10/10/19. Dorothy is in there. She is spicy. That girl is spicy. But even though I didn't necessarily think that I was going to be a mother, I always did want a family of my own. And at the end, so my granddaughter petitioned. There was no plan for a flower girl at my niece's wedding. During one of the phone calls that my daughter was having with her aunt, my granddaughter basically was like, so what's up with the flower girl thing? Like, what's going on? And she ended up being invited as the flower girl.
What?
And it was really wonderful because it was me, and Maya's in school out there. So me and Maya and Naila and her daughter, and we got to go around, and I got to show my granddaughter the places where her mom had been. And and Maya, who's born here, she didn't know about a lot of those things. But one of the things that I wanted to have happen was to make sure that my granddaughter got to put her feet in the Pacific Ocean. She's been to the Atlantic. She needed to be in the Pacific. And it just so happens that the city of San Francisco has turned one end of Ocean Beach back into a park because the sand would blow over this part of the Great Highway anyway. And then during COVID, they kind of shut that area down. And then last year, 2025, they actually did a bond measure and actually made it into a park. And that was the part of the Great Highway where I worked at San Francisco State. I lived in Oakland. It could take me almost 2 hours to get home just because of traffic. So I would usually get off of work, go get a sandwich, go get some food or something, drive in my little Volkswagen to the beach, sit on top of my car and watch the sunset and watch people with their kids and their dogs and flying kites, riding horses, just all kinds of stuff out there. And it was just so beautiful and so calming and so peaceful. And I remember going to the water with a few coins and some sweets and asking for a family, right? And I have the picture in my phone, and my granddaughter, she walked down to that water like she had been there, but like she was I was like, girl, wait up. And she was like, whatever, and just kept walking towards the water, and the sun was setting. So it was like around the time of day that I would have gone, 30 years earlier to sit at the beach. And that blew me away. Like, wow, I asked for a family to create my own family. And here I am with them. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful full circle moment. And I mean, I think your life is a testament to the power of manifestation, the power of your own conscious thought. I would say you're definitely powerful beyond measure at this point. But when you hear powerful beyond measure, what does that feel like in your body these days compared to your life that you described as tragic boho underemployment?
I think just resilience, like, okay, this happened and yeah, that sucked. However, I still want to do these things. I still want to have these things. Still want to go these places. And even getting here, like, I don't even think you have time to hear the story about how magical, like, kind of once I said I want to be in Charlotte by October of 2000, how the universe said, bet. And when I say made stuff, all kinds of stuff happen for that to happen. And when I stepped off that train on September 28th, I was like, oh, snap. Because, so literally, I was driving from Oakland to Berkeley. Things with my ex-husband were already kind of a crazy mess. I was stressed out. I was exhausted. I'm trying to work. I'm trying to raise people. I'm far away from my folks. It was a lot. It was just a lot. And I was just like, and my mother was ill and I didn't know how long she'd be on the planet. And I was like, I want to be in Charlotte by October. And it was like, somebody heard that, right? A couple of weeks later, days, I'm at work. I was never the first person in the office. Not never, not even once, never. I'm in there completely alone. I go in, put down my bag, I go to turn on the computer, and I hear a voice. The voice says, if you want to be in Charlotte by October of 2000, you got to quit this job today. I'm like, what? And it says it again. I get up, I go look out the door. I'm like, what? Who said that? I sit back down. I go to turn the computer on again. If you want to be in Charlotte by October, you got to quit this job today. I'm like, so now I'm talking back to it. You do know that my husband is at the house watching Mighty Mouse smoking a joint, because I still don't know whether he quit the job or lost the job. And the voice says, if you want to be in Charlotte by October, you got to quit this job today. So I'm like, bet. Turn it on, open up Microsoft Word, type up the letter. Go get it off the printer, proofread it, sign it. By this time, my boss is in the office. So I give it to him. It's 2 weeks notice. He says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I want to be in Charlotte by October. It is the end of June. It's the end of June, because 4th of July was like that. It was a Tuesday. And I think maybe the following week, 4th of July, was the middle of the week. And we had a little barbecue at the house. My friend Stephanie comes over. Hadn't seen her in a couple of weeks, couple of months or whatever. And she had done her PhD at Yale in African American Studies and Sociology. Her thesis project was an organization called Girls After School Academy. It was part of a Hope 6 project in San Francisco that was going to be leveled, which they're still working on. It was called Sunnydale. And it's in a part of San Francisco that you will never see, because it's on the back end of a mountain, one way in, one way out. 4 generations of African American, Latino, and Asian Pacific Islander women, where, you know, the teenager gets pregnant at 16. When she gets 18, she gets an apartment in the same complex. She has a baby, and it just had continued. And so Stephanie's thesis was that if you give people financial literacy, education, and other supports, that then when this Hope 6 thing finishes, because there will not be a way for that cycle to continue, that we will uplift this group of girls. So she asked me, what's going on? And at that point, I don't think I had even told my husband that I had quit my job. I gave notice. And she said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I want to be in Charlotte by October. She's like, okay, well, remind me again of what you do. And I told her about the youth development work and the grant writing and this and that. She said, oh my God, we needed you last summer and we need you right now. Because the founding executive director of the organization, Girls After School Academy, was leaving, and they had used the arts. It wasn't written formally into the program, but they had used the arts, drumming and dance and filmmaking and capoeira, all these different things that they had brought in, because the founding executive director and her husband were both very much engaged in the arts in the Bay Area. And so she said that what they were looking for was someone that could help them compile those stories and basically write about, interview the girls, interview some of the artists that they worked with, and kind of create a brief for the new executive director. Because if that wasn't that person's like forte, so they would understand the impact that it had had and what had been done and why it had been done. And she's like, I'm going to give you my friend's name. I'm going to call her. I'm giving you her number. And then y'all need to talk over the weekend. So I'm like, okay, bet. So she gives me her number. We talk. And she says, well, I have time next Tuesday. Now, remember, I had quit my job on Tuesday, on a Tuesday. And I'm meeting with her on a Tuesday. So I go meet with her, and we're sitting and we're talking, and she's telling me about their needs. She asked me about, what my background is and what my interest is. And she's like, yeah, I think that this could work. what are your rates? In that moment, a conversation that I had with my mentor, Joe Lewis Moore, who I worked on The Legacy of the Panthers with, and he had told me that once I got my master's, that I shouldn't do any kind of consulting work with communities or anything for less than $75 an hour. And in that moment, at 24 years old, I said to Joe, who's going to pay me $75 an hour? And he said to me, you'd be surprised. So now she said, what's your rate? That whole conversation goes through my mind. My heart is going boom, 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 boom. And out of my mouth tumbles $75 an hour. And she said, great, because I have $17,000 in unrestricted funds that we didn't use in this fiscal year. And you can earn as much or as little of it between now and the time that you go to Charlotte. And when you get to Charlotte, we still may have some things that you can do for us because this new person coming in might also need some help. And so in a week, 2 weeks time, I basically tripled my salary, and I was able to make enough money to move my entire family across country to arrive in Charlotte on September 28th, 2000.
Unreal. Yeah. Unreal. People are going to listen to this and
that's why I'm a believer. You know, it's like I get shown, and that's why I get mad at myself, because I get in these moments, like even with making this transition to go to Guyana for a few months and the whole thing, and I get scared and I get terrified and I have a little panic attack, and I'm like, girl, but it always works out. Why are we tripping?
It always works out. Yes, that's a mantra we all need to kind of stick with, repeat on a daily basis. That's a reminder we all need. It always works out. I like to say it's working through me for me. No matter how it feels, no matter how it looks in this moment, it's always going to work out. Love that. If your life so far were a creative work, what title would you give it in this current chapter?
In this current chapter? I don't know if I've thought of a title in this current chapter. There was a point where I was threatening to write a book, Parenting in the New Millennium on the Cheap with Little Sleep. But like, that's not really this vibe.
We need that book. We definitely need it. I work with moms. The book is needed.
So there's that. I don't know. You'll have to ask me in a couple of months, like kind of once my nervous system has kind of stabilized, what this chapter is called. I don't know yet.
Do you have a title for previous chapters, possibly?
Well, the Parenting in the New Millennium was a big one. I've had a lot of different books. There was a point where I was, Catherine Cortlandt, African-American Girl on the Go. There's also been, especially even coming to Charlotte, because Charlotte was so very different 25 years ago and so very different from any place that I had been previously. So there was a little bit of culture shock and adjusting of who I am and how I am in order to kind of figure out how to be here. So I thought, what was that? It was something about like the repeated misadventures of an Afro-Caribbean Yankee in the New South. And I would have these thoughts like usually at some work thing where you've got things happening around you and you're just like, what are these people talking about? Like, why are we talking about a dog in this? Why are we talking about dogs? Like, what is going on? So, yes.
So you mentioned going to Guyana for a couple of months for some rest and reflection. What do you think you are actually unbirthing right now to make space for what's next? And what does rest actually mean for you emotionally and spiritually?
So I think one of the things that I'm unbirthing is, and having to unbirth is, what is your life supposed to look like? Because a year ago, I moved into this apartment, which for me, this was like 16-year-old Catherine's like wildest dream to have the brick walls and the big windows and the easel and the whole thing. Like that was the vibe. And so I expected to spend a little more time here, even though I knew that my time in Charlotte was coming to an end, just because it's just time. It's just time to do something else. It's time to do something new. And I'm not shitting on Charlotte in any way, because I think that in the past 25 years, it's really kind of flowered, especially for young artists and the whole thing. But I don't need to be trying to hop on that train. It's time to create my own train and create a new vision for who I am, and being able to rest and being in the presence of a person who, my friend Tracy, who has created this wild, dynamic life in the forest in Guyana. You know, coming from the same place as me. She was born and raised in New York City and northern New Jersey, but somehow has fashioned this life that has her in the woods wearing tie-dye, inviting people to her home to swim in the Blackwater Creek. And she said to me, you know, just given what I know about just the 25 years that I've known you, you need to sleep for 30 days. And so she's been, as she walks around the property, she's like, yeah, and you can sleep in that hammock and that hammock and that hammock. And I promise you, I'm going to sleep in every hammock up there. And I'm going to allow the black water to heal the parts of me that are still in push-through mode, because like so much has happened. I've had 2 friends pass away in the winter, spring, and while I know they're both in better places, both amazing creative artists. Here, you asked me earlier about the name of the book, and I think about my friend Litna, and I think you know Litna as well. And I met Litna in Oakland originally. He came into the bead store and we got to talking, and he would buy ankhs and beads to embellish the crowns that he used to make. And then he came into the store one day and said, oh, I'm moving to LA. I thought I would never see that man again in my life. And then when I was working in Spirit Square, working for the Cultural Education Collaborative, I go down to a meeting at the Blumenthal. And I got there a little late because I was coming from another meeting. There weren't enough chairs. I sit on the floor and they're doing the artist introductions around the room. And I hear that voice and I'm like, whoa, I had like, what? So I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And then I go over to him and I'm like, do you remember me from Orb Weaver in Oakland? And he's like, of course I remember you, baby sugars. And then we go downstairs and I didn't know that he knew my ex-husband, because he had been friends. My ex-husband used to go to the parties that Litna would give in his loft in Oakland, right? So they embrace, and then he embraces the children. And then from that time on, he was one of the artists at the Round Table through the Afro Center, and just got closer and closer. And so I remember we would sit at Tracy's house up off of Mount Holly, Huntersville Road. And he's like, my goal in life is to be unfettered. So unfettered, that is, that's the title of the chapter or the new book, Unfettered.
And it's amazing. It's almost like you have to unroot yourself from where you've grown familiar and pluck yourself out of it and put yourself somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to Guyana. What are you hoping to get from that experience there? And a lot of times we have to convince ourselves that we deserve rest, especially artists, because we feel like we have to keep going. We have to keep creating to keep up with, I don't know what, to pay these bills. There's always something. So it takes a certain level of courage to uproot yourself for 2 months and put yourself in a completely unfamiliar place to rest and recharge. And I'm super excited to see what you're going to come back with.
Me too, because like I don't know this new girl. You know, like she hasn't had this experience, right? But then also this experience, along with all the things that I now know about me and about life and all the skills that I've gained, Reiki and tattooing and, just all of the things. And that with my mind fully rested, if I'm doing everything, if I'm all this stuff that I've been telling you about, if I've done all of that literally on a dental floss, a shoestring, and a wing and a prayer, exhausted, completely spent most of the time, but still been able to get all this stuff done. So what would I be able to do rested? I have no idea. None. And I'm excited because I like the woman that I am. I've had moments where I haven't, or, I could lose a few pounds. I could do this. I could do that. I wish I had done X, Y, and Z earlier. I wish I had done X, Y, and Z differently. And then you get down on yourself. I call that voice Sheila. I frequently have to tell her to because she gets on my nerves because she be like, oh, if you did. Like, nobody talks to you worse than that chick in your head, right? And I've been actively trying to kill her for a long time, for lack of a better, because she does me no good. She does me no good in the face of all this other evidence.
The mind is tricky. I've also discovered that. The mind will get you in a stuck place.
It's a 3-ring circus. It's got monkeys, a gang of clowns, and shit is off and on fire. You just have to, bring it in and get centered and remind yourself of who you are, where you are. I'm sitting in my wildest dream. When I was 8 years old, there used to be a store in New York called Conran's, kind of like IKEA, but more high end. And they had beautiful stuff in there. And that was the first time I ever sat in an egg chair. And I was like, when I get older, I'm going to have me an egg chair. And it took a long time. And it came in pieces. I got the frame because I could have ordered it on Amazon or whatever, but it would have cost me a gang of money to ship it because it's heavy. Pier 1 Imports was going out of business. I was dropping my youngest daughter off. She had gotten into the high school program for UNCSA. I was headed to Target to get her some little things that she needed, and it said 70% off on the window. So I just popped in there, did a once around, picked up a few things, put them back, was walking out the store and saw just the rack. And I was like, well, do y'all have the chair? And they're like, no, we don't know what happened. Like, somebody bought the chair part or whatever. And so we just have this. And I was like, well, how much? She said $50. I said, I'm going to pull the car around. And I put it in the back. And I didn't have a chair for it for a long time. And then I went on Facebook Marketplace one day. And this was on there, and the lady lived maybe 7 minutes from my house. She was like, you got to pay me $100 on Venmo, and then you give me the $25 when you get here. I was like, bet. Loaded it up, and here we are. So it's a little weird. I get terrified sometimes, have a little panic attack. And then I do my breathing, and I remember who I am, and I remember what's going on. I have friends and people in my life who are like, well, what are you going to do when you come back? You're not going to have a place. And I'm like, you need to calm down and relax because it's going to be okay. Because honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. Some days I'm like, I'm put all this stuff in storage and it's going to be fine. Other days I'm like, I'm going to sell all this foolishness. Other days I'm like, I will walk out of here right now and leave all this shit up in here because I'm sick of it. Because I don't want to pack it again. I don't want to deal with it again. I don't want to think about it again. And it just depends on what hour of the day you catch me where I'm at in terms of what's next or what's after. And I realized that this is another part of my faith walk, to say, I'm going to go do this thing for 2 months. And whatever comes out of that, I'm going to do that. And then whatever comes out of that, I'm going to do that, because that's what I've been doing.
That is exactly what you've been doing. You've been giving birth over and over to different versions of yourself, over and over and over again. I guess our last question would be, and you kind of told us what you're birthing. You don't know what you're birthing, and you're okay with being in that space. That's a level of faith and freedom that a lot of people cannot trust. Trust in the process. People can't do that. Like,
yeah.
How, Catherine?
I don't know. I mean, many a time I've stood at a bus stop in the rain holding 2 bags of groceries thinking, the hell are you doing? But I just keep on keeping on.
So what feels the most true to who you are becoming, who you're giving birth to in this moment?
I think the spirit of adventure. Like, just, it's going to be an adventure regardless. And there's going to be laughter, and there's going to be fun, and it's going to be terrifying. I think also getting used to being terrified and being okay, I'm terrified. I don't know what's on the other side of this. But it's probably going to be okay. So I'll work with probably.
I absolutely love it. So I'm so intrigued. We have to do a part 2 when you come back from Guyana, because I need the details on what you birthed and what you'll continue to birth as a result of that experience. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
I think I told it all.
You certainly laid it out there. Thank you so much, Miss Catherine Cortlandt. You are a phenomenal, amazing, incredible beam of light. We are so grateful to have you in our presence. Wow. I'm so glad I got a chance to speak with you. This amazing woman that I only knew a fraction of you this entire time. I can't believe it. I feel enlightened. Thank you.
Thank you.